Hello, US1. How are you guys doing? Joke of the day. Kind of sort of appropriate here. So, how does the man in the moon cut his hair? He just eclipses it. Yes, I could use that. Oh my goodness. Um, but anywho, all right. I hope all is well. For today, we're actually starting a new unit. So this new unit will be the West and also immigration. So two kind of like different types of things, but we're going to make them kind of work together. Um, so as we prepare for this unit, which will take us basically through the month of May here, um, expect a quiz when we're done with the stuff on the West, and then we'll have another quiz on the immigration when we're done there, and again another short essay when we're done with all this. So again, there's your reminder that that is coming. Also, the next piece of your research outline is due on Monday, which is simply just a primary source. So just send me a link. I'll go check it out, make sure it is in fact a primary source. But this is the last graded check-in for your research outline. So right now you should be like knee deep in this thing. And again, all the work you're putting in um, will help you with the final product. Right? You've actually done pieces of it already, right? So you've already done 3 of the 5 sources for your bibliography. You've already done your thesis. You've got your 3 topic sentences, right? All that stuff goes directly into the final product. So, like, you're actually doing it as you go along. Again, if you have questions, feel free to, email me through the whole process. Okay. But I hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and talk to you guys later. So today we'll begin our new unit, which is kind of a mashup of 2 different things, so they are actually connected. So we're going to start by talking about the West, and then in the second half of this unit, we'll be talking about immigration. So in terms of closing of the West, we're talking about mostly the Great Plains. Um, but to start that conversation, and what kind of kickstarts this, what we're going to see is a conflict between white American encroachment and Native Americans who are living out there, is the Transcontinental Railroad. And so the Transcontinental Railroad has been a dream since gold was discovered out in California. So you remember when we were talking about Manifest Destiny, it was the Oregon Trail, right? You had to walk if you wanted to get to California. If only there was a quicker way. Well, the railroad was around, and so the railroad was definitely a viable option. The problem was, where do you put it? Because wherever you put the railroad, that will bring economic opportunity, towns, um, and whatnot. So this was contentious. Southerners wanted the railroad to go through southern states. Northerners wanted the railroad to go through northern states. Where are you going to put it? And then the Civil War happens. And of course, with the Civil War, all those Southern Congress people leave, you're just left with Northern Republicans in Congress. And so it's very easy to decide now where to put the railroad. We're going to put it through the North. So the railroad is going to start in Nebraska, in the Nebraska territory, and will go all the way out to California. And so from Nebraska, you can connect with rail lines from Chicago and whatnot. So this is known as the Big Road. You have 2 companies that are going to kind of like be working on this. You have the Central Pacific, which is starting out in California. So C for California. And then you have the Union Pacific. Oh, there's that name Union, right? And they're starting from the middle of the country, starting from Nebraska and moving west. So both of these companies are private companies. They're working at the same time. And they're both using immigrant labor. So the Central Pacific is using Chinese immigrants. So again, easy to remember, C for Central. They're from California using Chinese immigrants. The Union Pacific, from the middle of the country, they're using the Irish. And again, there is lots and lots of money to be made in this. So each company gets paid for every mile of track that they put down. So for every mile over flat territory, which is basically what the Union Pacific is going to be doing, they will get $16,000 for every mile of track. The Central Pacific has to go through the mountains. The mountains are a little bit more difficult, so the government will pay them $48,000 for every mile that way. In addition, they also get right-of-way traffic on either side of their railroad lines. It's places to store gear, to build temporary housing for the workers, and whatnot. So they get that land. That land is given to them by the government. Afterwards, they can then sell that land for $3 an acre because the land is now very valuable since there's a railroad on it, and that will bring another $500 million in profits to these companies. Lots of money. It's also, since there's lots of money involved for every mile you put down, it's also a race. For the Union Pacific, they want to put down more miles. The Central Pacific wants to put down more miles. So eventually they meet at Promontory Point, Utah, and you have this famous image where you can see both locomotives kind of in the distance there. And we have a ceremony in Promontory Point, Utah, known as the Golden Spike Ceremony. And so Leland Stanford of Stanford University fame, he was also president of the Central Pacific. He hammers in the final spike. And what they actually do, and you can see this in the image on the right, is they hook up a telegraph wire to that spike. And so as the spike is nailed, the final spike is nailed in, the hammering of that will send a pulse over the telegraph wire. And this is the first event actually kind of relayed sort of live around the country. And it is done, is quickly tapped out on the telegraph when it is finished. And there's rejoicing all around the country. Big parades and cannon salutes in Chicago. They actually ring the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. And the Transcontinental Railroad is important because we talked about how Reconstruction kind of tries to bring North and South together. And it's the Transcontinental Railroad that brings East and West together. Now, there is a little bit of scandal that comes with this. And so the Credit Mobilier is a fake company. So the company does not exist. And so basically, the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific basically tell the government, oh, there's just so much work, we need to like hire kind of like a contractor, we need to subcontract out some of this work. And so the government's like, yeah, sure, we don't care. Like, just send us the bills. And so what you have here is that the Union Pacific and Central Pacific are the ones actually doing the work. They just create fake bills and send them to the government, and they overcharge the government. So for for $30,000 worth of work, the Credit Mobilier actually charges the government $50,000, and then those profits are divided evenly between the Union Pacific and the Central Pacific. It was a heck of a scandal when this thing came out. It went all the way up through Grant's, because he's president this time, through his cabinet. His vice president was actually implicated in this, and he had to be removed from the ticket. He wasn't Grant's vice president for the second term. It was a huge investigation. The Central Pacific, when the government started looking into wrongdoing there, it was noticed that all of their records mysteriously burned in a fire. So, oh well, there goes all the paperwork. But eventually, what kind of happened was that Congress didn't have the stomach to really dig deep, because what the Central Pacific and Union Pacific did was they sold stock to members of Congress. So those members of Congress were actually making money, making profits every time the company made a profit. So as a result, nothing really came of this, but it does kind of paint Grant's presidency as one just kind of filled with rampant corruption. But now, with this railroad and this idea of it is done, this is going to increase traffic out west, and this is going to have a massive impact on Native American tribes that are living out there. And that's what we can start talking about with our next class.